10 seconds out.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Good morning, Rob. And while we're at it, I think, Rob, I'll just let you introduce our guest this morning.
Oh, well, yeah. It's great to be doing the New Media Show today. This is an exciting day for us. We definitely have been talking about what Google has been up to, and we happen to have the product manager on from Google Podcasts, and his name is Zack Reneau-Wedeen. And he's been, I guess, he's been working on the podcast stuff for a little while at Google, and we're going to find out, a little bit more about that and his process and what he went through to get this new podcast service up and running. Zack, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Todd. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad that we could find this time, and I know that you're only able to stay with us for about 30 minutes, so we want to use our time with you wisely. I think the big question probably a lot of podcasters have is, how did you get from where you were to where you are right now, and where's the whole process heading? Is there something else coming? I mean, we're kind of curious on the vision on where Google's going with podcasting.
For sure. So I guess the recent news is that we released an app in the Android Google Play Store, and that's really like the big news right now. But I think just to take you guys back like a little while, we've actually been working on podcasts for a couple years now. And it kind of started just from a desire to organize audio information the way that we organize text and video and image information. And then also kind of seeing that over the past few years, there's been this explosion. I'm sure you guys have seen it too, in Blueberry and on Spreaker, Boxnest, etc. That there's just so many more podcasts being created, so many more high quality podcasts being created, and so much more variety, to the point where, like, when I started listening to podcasts, it was actually to study for the SAT, and I kind of used it as an educational tool for a while. But then within the last like 5 years especially, and even more like the last couple of years, it's just become so much more content for everyone. And so it starts to be hard to actually organize podcasts. And what we want to do is make that easier. And we think where Google's strengths really align comes to helping people discover podcasts, helping people find podcasts that they're going to like. And that's kind of what Google has done in terms of making it easy to find articles on the internet, images on the internet, videos on the internet, news, maps, etc. And so it sort of seems strange to us that audio didn't have the same treatment. And everyone at Google was really excited about this insight and wants us to keep pursuing it.
One thing that I was excited about was, and maybe you can't go into this, but I had heard, and I don't know exactly where it came from, is, if you go to the google.com webpage and there's a certain layer of information there. You can search for images, there's different hierarchy on you can just do regular Google search, obviously, but you can narrow it even tighter.
Yeah, you can do videos.
Yeah, videos. What's the chance of podcasts having an equal placement on the google.com page as being an individual selection? If you're following
so I totally follow. So you're talking about that top row,
right?
And depending on what you search for, it'll also update dynamically to say, if let's say you search Hawaii, maps might be one of the first options.
Right.
Images might be a top option as well, because people like to look at Hawaii because it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we don't have any plans to share when it comes to that, as you kind of predicted. I can say that you're not the first to ask, and it seems like, it doesn't seem to me like there's a huge difference between how we should treat audio and how we treat some of those other formats.
Yeah.
So, that seems like one way that could potentially help more people discover podcasts and find podcasts that they'll like. And so, since it's a way to do that, we're open to that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I know that in the past, in the early years of Google's, search presence on the internet, they did have an area up on that top nav bar called audio, and I know that this was probably in the mid 2000s is when they actually had this, and I know that they took it down because back in those days, I don't know, they didn't find that a lot of people were actually using that area up there, but I think maybe audio is maybe a little bit too generic. So I think that Todd's question is really, it's really interesting because maybe taking that perspective more towards a very specific kind of reference to a particular medium, a podcast, which it didn't have back then, might be the key to making it work. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, when you think about audio, it can include music, it can include lectures, etc. And one nice thing about podcasts is that most people who are familiar with podcasts kind of have a concept of what that limits to, which is something that's very useful when you're searching. So I think that's a really good point. And I also think, just to highlight again, like the last few years have been so remarkable when it comes to, all the people making podcasts, all the celebrities, large media organizations, small media organizations, people like us in 3 different cities over Skype. And so I'm just really excited about the potential there because I think it is a little bit different from how it might have been, back in the mid 2000s when it comes to creating a great product on the podcasting front.
One thing that, a couple of things on the technical side that we're curious about is, number one, are we going to be able to have the ability to see what feed Google is using in the actual search results? Is there going to be a way to find out that info? Because the case being, we recently just saw where one of the vendors made public some feeds that ended up obscuring the primary feed of the podcasters. In other words, you'd search for, let's say, for my show, and the subscribe button showed up for that third-party service versus the feed that came from my podcast. Is there going to be a way that we're going to be able, as the owners of the show, to send a signal either through Google, through the dashboard, or some way saying, hey, this is the primary feed you should be using if there's some conflicting feeds out there? Or are we just going to have to deal on a case-by-case basis if someone put something out there, a mirrored feed somewhere with the header data that the technical spec requires? Are we going to be able to call them on that, or what's going to be our recourse? If there's even, I don't know if you guys have even thought about it.
Yeah, we've definitely thought about it. And, there are so many, like, part of the amazing thing about podcasting, and one of the reasons why the opportunity is so big, one of the reasons why it's so easy to get started and make a new podcast, and there's all this creativity, is that RSS is an open standard. And with that amazing asset for the industry also comes some of these problems of, like, okay, there is one podcast and there might be many different RSS feeds kind of like showing the contents of that podcast online. And so what Google wants to do is have the right feed used to show the contents. And, if you end up with the wrong feed, it makes it so that publishers can't see the right metrics necessarily. Although the metrics, usually the MP3 files are the same,
right,
which helps a little bit with that. It also can make it so that it goes stale if the third-party host ends up not updating or not mirroring anymore. And so this is an issue that we have thought about and thankfully haven't encountered as much as you might expect so far. But I think really what we want to do going forward is make sure that publishers have the tools to get their podcast out there. And if the publisher is creating the content and wants it to be a particular feed, that should be something that's mirrored. So I think, in that case, the internet does a really good job today of everybody stepping up, and oftentimes mirroring an RSS feed is actually a very helpful thing, or at least was earlier in podcasting. But I think like the short answer to your question is we want to try to avoid that situation that you just described. And so as those situations come up, we'll be thinking about what the best strategy is. And we do have a lot of logic that goes into, similarly to how search results are ranked on Google.com when you do a search, it goes into selecting which feed seems to be the most legitimate for a podcast. And it is a nice thing that the MP3 file really is the thing that usually stays constant throughout those feeds, but still you want to make sure that the RSS feed being used is one that's going to be updated and one that's going to reflect the state of the podcast that the publisher wants.
Well, that's good that you guys are thinking about that. I would imagine you would have been. Another thing that we're actually kind of struggling with at Blueberry, we're really not struggling with, but it's some individual unique use cases where, and again, I'll just use my show as an example. I do both an audio and a video podcast. So on the same page, technically, even within the same post, there are two separate RSS feeds that one feeds the video, two feeds the audio version of the show. And while so far, when I'm searching for the show on Google, it sees both the Google video and Google audio. The Geek News Central audio and the Geek News Central video portions of the feed. You definitely have to have the search results exactly right to get one or the other to show up. So how are you handling then? From the spec says only one RSS feed should be linked in the header page. What do you do for an instance like me where I have two that goes along with the same show? Is the spec going to be permissible to allow to have two feeds in there, and will Google recognize that and not throw one out?
Well, and Todd, there's even another
in general,
question. Yeah. Does
Go
Google
ahead, Rob.
Podcasts support video podcasts? I'm not sure. I haven't seen that.
So there aren't any video podcasts currently.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's no feature to announce there. Although, obviously as a user of the product, in the case where you do want a video podcast, it can be nice to have it. So I'm not saying that podcasts shouldn't ever be video or anything like that.
Sure.
But the product today does not support that.
Okay.
Yeah.
To go back to your original question, right now, like as the tech support answer that I would give you is that it's probably most useful to create a website or a web page for each of the podcasts, so that you can have that one-to-one relationship. But at the same time, Google will try to be smart about finding different podcasts on the web and associating those podcasts with web pages to really understand more about the podcast. So what I'm telling you is the way that you can ensure that it works. But I won't say that it definitely won't work unless you do this.
Right.
You're not the first person to have a weird situation like this, and even more prevalently, you're not the first or you aren't doing this, but there are a lot of people who just have neglected this or have accidentally not included these links or malformatted them, etc. And so we knew, we weren't going to be able to convince everyone to do everything right before we launched. So, hopefully more and more people do things right now that we have launched, and now that more people are trying out the app and enjoying it and telling friends about it. And so we do think, and we are seeing a lot of people like reach out to us and get everything up to spec. But it's also a situation where going into the launch, it would have been very foolish to try to do things the other way around.
Yeah, I think our approach for at least PowerPress is when we come out with the next version, we're going to recommend that people have, especially in situations like mine, or people or folks have maybe multiple shows It's not going to be specifically affecting people that are doing like category podcasting because we've got a solution for that. But setting up individual pages to make sure that at least there's one page on the website that has all the metadata exactly for that single show, so it can be picked up if someone's finding they're having problems being picked up otherwise. But so far, I don't know, Rob, I've had no problems finding shows. I do notice that some sites, because they all already have great Google ranking, oftentimes our content is up on top and then the podcast is 2 or 3 search results below, but you would kind of expect that just because of the standard Google search results.
Yeah. So does Google have any kind of special kind of algorithm that you guys are using to rank podcasts specifically in search, and how that correlates to kind of the editorial side of your app, right? Of how podcasts are selected to be featured. Is that an editorial thing, or that's human edited, or are you guys using an algorithm somehow to come up with shows to feature in the app itself? If you could talk about those things, ranking and algorithms, and how that plays into this.
For sure. I think it's really important because that is one of the areas where we think Google can do a great job and really help find signal in all the noise of all the podcasts going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing that we found is that our goal with Google Podcasts is to help double worldwide podcast listenership and bring tens and hundreds of more millions people into the podcasting fold as podcast listeners. And these people that start listening to podcasts for the first time over the next few years might not be exactly the same as the people who have already been listening to podcasts. Mm-hmm. And even the people who are already listening to podcasts, are an extremely diverse group with a really diverse set of interests. So for that reason, we want to make sure that our recommendations are personalized. And I think the easy solution, and a solution that a lot of publishers want as long as they are at the top of the rankings, is a curated solution.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, given the diversity of the audience already and what we think will be an increasing diversity over time, the curated solution doesn't really scale. And we think we'll end up with biases that allow for actually a less personalized experience, where people trying the product for the first time, people all around the world who might have interests totally different from mine, don't actually have as easy a time as possible finding content they'll love. So we've taken a more algorithmic approach, and that's what we're planning to stick with. And I think actually once people hear all the details, it's actually a really exciting opportunity for publishers, because there are a lot of tools at your disposal as a podcaster to get in a good position when it comes to the recommendations. So to give you an example, there's a pretty new podcast by Casey Neistat, who is, I think, originally famous as a YouTuber. He has about 10 million subscribers on YouTube.
Sure.
And I think around 2 million followers on Twitter. And so just the act of him tweeting, here's the link that you can go find me on Google Podcasts, actually has a big impact in terms of generating buzz. You can see that a lot of people did go and listen, or like the algorithm understands that a lot of people did go and listen, and then can use that to say, okay, this podcast is trending, or this podcast now, it's clear that people who like X podcast also like couples therapy with Candace and Casey. And so that can help the algorithm be smarter. But also, as a podcaster, all you need to do is promote your podcast. And so it's a kind of nice thing where I think people who see this and take advantage of it actually have a lot to gain, but it's not sort of king-making by a few people. It's actually up to the podcaster to try to lean into it. The same way, if you want to develop a following on Instagram, the best way to do that is to create great content and let people know about it. And so that's kind of similar for Google Podcasts, is that the best way to get, like, quote unquote featured is to create a great podcast and as many people far and wide know about it as possible.
Zach, if you're doing a tweet and you're trying to specifically target the Google Podcast app, there's really no direct hyperlink to that. It's because it's in the search results. So do you just, what's the strategy then as far as promoting specifically the Google Podcast link or the Google Podcast app?
So I'm really glad you asked. There actually is a way to generate links.
Yeah.
So if you go to our developer documentation, there is a link to our link generator tool. Mm-hmm. No worries. And honestly, I think we have a lot more work to do there. A lot of people have requested the ability to share a link from inside the app, so you don't have to go to our tool, usually with a understanding of what the RSS feed is. So it's not to say that product is finished, but a lot of people have already taken advantage of it. And maybe we can include like a link in the show notes or something to the place where you go to generate a link, because I think that's actually a really useful tool that a lot of people aren't aware of, and getting the word out to more people will help more podcasters get discovered.
A couple of questions that were from the chat room, and I don't think this is ever going to be possible. One question I have for Zach is, any plans for being able to add a private RSS feed? If it's private, there's no way for you to index it. So,
well, you could have private episodes, but it could be a public feed. I mean, that's possible.
Yeah, usually they don't work that way.
Yeah, so I'm glad this question came up, because I think right now these private RSS feeds are an important part of the podcast ecosystem. And if you're using Google Podcasts, there's not yet a way to listen to these podcasts, help the publishers monetize. And one thing that we're really committed to over time is supporting a diverse array of business models. So maybe your podcast has 5,000 listeners, and if when you get 100,000, you'll make a ton of money on ads, but right now you're a little bit small. But maybe your listeners are actually ferociously passionate about your podcast, and they would pay a few dollars a month for it. So that's just an example of a business model that we think could be supported better throughout the podcasting industry, and we want to help with that. And in terms of the exact implementation, we don't have a decision to share in terms of how it would be implemented. Right now, the Google Podcast app is all public feeds. But, not to say that we don't recognize how useful some of these private feeds, especially through services like Patreon, can be. And so I appreciate the question, and I'm excited for the potential there, because I think it can help a lot more podcasters join the fold and get discovered and find the business model that's for you, which may be ad support and maybe something else.
I think the questions are coming fast and furious in the comments section. Daniel Lewis asked, what are the best way for listeners to share a podcast they like with someone else? He says there doesn't seem to be a sharing option yet. I'm just going to say off the top, wouldn't we we're just going to need to make that link available that we're sharing publicly and tell our audience to share that link. Isn't that going to be the case?
I think in the short term, that would be my recommendation. And I sort of already said this, but we understand that sharing from within the app is an important feature request. And so right now, I should note that these links work on Android phones. But if you open the link on an iPhone or on your desktop computer, it actually will redirect you to the Play Store, just to the app. So one thing that we want to make sure is that there's not an expectation that a link will work in a situation where it doesn't work. And so, as Google Podcast becomes available on more surfaces where you use Google, it'll also be easier to share these links and just be able to trust that no matter where you are, you can find and listen to a podcast.
One of the podcasters said, what are some best practices? He says, it's because sometimes hyperlinks and show notes don't work. Sometimes they do. They would wish that bold and italics works in show notes. So basically they're saying they're looking at the metadata that's being picked up in the app, and they would wish that it would be replicated. Or I know sometimes you can't pull, Google can.
It could be a security problem.
Yeah,
too.
I would think so. But any comment on that, or should we have them direct questions to your team on specifically on those issues?
Yeah, I think like one thing that's been really helpful for us is just the amount of input, feature requests, and context that we've gotten from podcasters and podcast listeners through Twitter. So it might be good to share that. I'm just ZACKRW, Zack RW. And anyone should feel free to reach out there. With regard to the specific question about text and formatting in the show notes, that's definitely something that's been useful for a lot of podcasters, and I think has kind of always been like questionable how supported it is in the spec, but has sort of been de facto supported in a lot of different contexts. And even some examples, like when people put a timestamp in of like 2:53, some podcast apps then allow you to link. If you tap on that, it will take you to 2 minutes and 53 seconds into the podcast, which I find to be a very useful feature. I know like the Vergecast does that, and a lot of the Ringer podcasts do that. And so on a show like the Bill Simmons podcast, where he might have an hour and a half show with a guest 30 minutes in, that can be a really useful feature. So I agree with whoever submitted the question that a lot of this stuff is useful. And you're also right. I think, Rob, it was you who said it, that it's important to be aware of some of the security considerations here. And so that's not a reason why this isn't possible. It's just a reason why you can't wholesale include everything that anyone might throw into the show notes.
Someone on YouTube Live said, thinking ahead to a hypothetical world where a user performs a search by voice and clicks play in the first audio podcast results, can podcasters tactfully tag relevant clips and extracts from a show? And I think it goes back to exactly what you say is time hacking stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's like sort of like the next level powered up version as well, where maybe you actually want to link straight to a clip, not only from your show notes, but from other contexts, and sort of chapterize your podcast. And this is kind of getting more into the future, but it's something we've talked about a lot when it comes to Google Home and the Google Assistant, where you have tons of people asking questions every day, and a lot of great information contained in podcasts that might be the answer to those questions. And Steve Pratt and Dan Meisner at Pacific Content, I think, have done a really good job starting to think about, and also challenging us to think about, some of the different ways that podcasts could be useful as audio answers or as a specific clip in response to a search. Because even though that might feel a little weird relative to the way you and I use podcasts on a daily basis, there are billions of people searching on Google every day. And so if people can figure out how to make that accessible and make that feel natural, there's a huge opportunity, especially in a lot of the areas where people are coming online, where you have some of the fastest internet user growth in places like India, and it's also correlated with some above average use of voice. And so I think podcasts are actually in a great position as the number of people using the internet grows, because audio is such a native format to all humans, and a lot of people, maybe the language that they're looking for isn't necessarily their first language, or they prefer to listen instead of reading, or their hands and eyes might be busy, and so they want a way to passively consume. And audio just seems really well positioned to help over 1 billion people searching on Google find the answers and the content that they are either looking for or are looking for and didn't even know it yet.
I've told Rob, I'm sorry,
It's okay.
I've always said for many, many years, I write my show notes for Google, but I do my podcast for the audience. So it just becomes more and more important now to have good, concise, comprehensive show notes with context, not necessarily just a transcript, a blob, but something that has links and information. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to dive into an area that we haven't really touched on yet before you have to take off here, but wanted to talk more specifically about the app itself and how it works, and the functionality of its existence in Android, right? The app is built. Let's talk a little bit about how the app is generated and how it works, and whether or not the app could be maybe a default app for Android as you look to the future. Those topics of how the app actually works from a technical perspective, and any tips that you can share with us about how users and podcasters can share that knowledge.
For sure. So the app is available on Android in the Google Play Store. You can search Google Podcasts and find it, or it's also linked to from our blog announcement, or easy to find on Twitter. And the way that the app actually works is that it's integrated with Google Assistant and Google Search. So what that means is it's kind of similar to Google Assistant app or the Google Lens app, if you're familiar with those. But if you're not, I can go into a little more detail, which is it's basically a full-featured Android app. But because it's so important to listen to podcasts in a variety of contexts and to have access to podcasts no matter where you are, no matter what device you're on, the podcast listening functionality is bundled in to the Google app so that it's integrated with Google Search and Google Assistant. But that doesn't place any limitations in terms of the types of features that we can build. And when we think about better podcast discovery, personalized recommendations, some of the transcription features that we haven't gotten into too much today but are really exciting, like when it comes to providing subtitles. If you're in a noisy location without headphones, or if you're hard of hearing, those can be really transformative features for people. And so in terms of how the app works, I think people should imagine it as just another Android app in terms of the types of features that we can build, but also something that's integrated with Google Assistant, available from Google Search, so that people can find podcasts that are freely available on the web in all the different contexts that they want to.
One listener was asking, I listen to podcasts in my care. Any chance that there be an option to make the app operate on a more traditional download functionality rather than streaming by default?
So we do support downloading podcasts, and if you go to the page of a specific episode, maybe we can put a screenshot or something in the show notes. I realize I'm complicating the show notes, so we'll have to build some support for more complicated show notes. But you can actually download the podcast right there from the app. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest feature requests that we've had since launch, which is really helpful to see how important this is, especially to existing listeners, has been the automatic download for subscribed podcasts, as well as some of the automatic cleanup features. And right now, the app does not automatically download podcasts, but it will clean up podcasts a certain number of days, which you can configure either after you downloaded it as well as after you finish listening to it. So definitely we know that people listen to podcasts in a lot of offline contexts, whether it's on the airplane. I was on an airplane yesterday listening to a podcast, or in the subway, or all these different places like driving in a remote location. And when your connectivity is not necessarily reliable, or if you want to download over Wi-Fi so you don't have to pay for the data to stream, these are real use cases that tons of people have. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting them so that people can listen to as many podcasts as they please.
Rob, I know we're out of time with Zack. Any final questions for him?
I guess share with us what you can about what you see coming to the app here in the short term. Is any kind of tips on any kind of improvements that you can see to the app that are coming in the short run, and kind of, I guess, just share with podcasters, because that's mainly who's listening to this, how they can better promote your app.
For sure. It might be worth sharing some more specifics about how to promote your podcast on Google Podcasts. But just to kind of focus on giving a sense of what's to come, We will have a number of new announcements. Just a few new announcements at Podcast Movement. Are you guys going to Podcast Movement in July? I guess already July.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So we do have a session organized. Timing is still TBD, but it'll probably either be the Tuesday, the 24th, or the Thursday, the 26th. And I'm really excited for that. It's going to be a conversation with Jenna Weisburn, who heads up Pineapple Street Media. And Pineapple has been doing a lot of amazing stuff in podcasting. So we're going to talk a bit about Google Podcast and what's to come with the app, and also talk about the creator program, which we announced with our launch. And that's kind of a whole separate line of thought we had, or I wish I had a lot more time to go into it. But the creator program is basically looking to help remove barriers to get into podcasting, especially since we see so many underrepresented groups in podcasting. When you look at the top charts, you see about 75% podcasts like this great podcast here hosted by white men versus only about 25 by women and even fewer by people of color. And so we really want to help make it easier to break into podcasting. There are a ton of other places where certain groups are underrepresented, whether it's nationally or from more rural areas. From the American South, there also is a little bit less content. And so we just want to make sure that anyone has a chance to join the fold and start making great podcasts and develop an audience. So there will be more news when it comes to the creator program in July at Podcast Movement. And then as well as with the app in kind of all of our focus areas, from making Google Podcasts using artificial intelligence to build some new features, especially around transcription, making Google Podcasts available in more surfaces, adding a lot of the features that just turn it into a really solid app. And also a little bit further down the road, I think, making sure that it's the most valuable or a super valuable platform for podcasters to be on, because really, like, podcasters decide where their audience listens, and we know that the podcast ecosystem overall is going to succeed best, and Google Podcast is going to succeed best if podcasters want the listeners to be on Google Podcasts. So that really is like one of our product pillars, is building features that podcasters are going to get really excited about, which is why some of the direct feedback through Twitter and other channels has been super helpful, because for podcasters, they kind of know what they want, even more than listeners who know what they want, but maybe also aren't thinking about some features that have never been invented before. So the feedback from both listeners and podcasters has been awesome, and dangerous thing to say, but the more the merrier from my perspective.
So I know we got tons of questions in the chat room, and I don't have time to go through all, and Zach's got to go. I got to respect his time. He's already stayed longer than he originally agreed to. So Zack RW is the Twitter address. Is that correct, Zach? I got that right?
That's right. Yeah, ZACKRW.
So tweet your questions to him. I'm sure you're going to inundate him. Be nice in your tweets, please. Zach, just, from Rob and I are both, I'm with Blueberry. Rob is obviously with Foxnest and Spreaker. We really appreciate Google's coming to play and in a big way and bringing this to the podcasters. I'm super, super excited about the future. I've always known, just from my own perspective and my own shows, just the absolute incredible power of the 8,000-pound gorilla known as Google. So just we're excited to see what's going to happen and look forward to the announcements at Podcast Movement. Rob, any thoughts here as well before we let Zach go?
Yeah, I just had kind of one final question, I guess, to help us kind of get a picture of where Google Podcasts is at this point. Zach, can you share how many podcasts you have in your catalog right now, and where you're at? Where are you at in that development in that progress?
So, sure, I can. Right now, I think we have a little over 2 million podcasts that you can find on the app.
Oh no, I'm talking about series.
I hesitate a little bit.
Yeah.
2 million individual podcasts?
Are you talking about
2 million
episodes? You're
series.
talking about series. Okay.
Okay.
No, I'm sure there are many more than 2 million episodes, but 2 million shows. I hesitate a little bit because I know that sounds like a large number, and it's a good sign that Google's able to find podcasts on the web. But really, like, making sure that we have all the podcasts you would ever want to listen to is our goal, and whether that's 2 million or 500,000 or 10 million, that's great. But like, we want to make sure that all the podcasts that people want to listen to are there. So that's the goal. And, thankfully, you said that you guys are appreciative of Google getting more involved when it comes to podcasting. And I also just want to say, like, likewise, we're super appreciative of services like Blueberry and Spreaker and Boxnest that have really kind of like shaped the podcast industry, and helped create such an amazing ecosystem that already has so many things working well. And so what I'm really focused on, what we're really focused on, is just figuring out the ways where we can be the most helpful. And we think right now that's bringing artificial intelligence to improve podcast discovery, build new features, as well as helping the ecosystem on Android, where there's so much opportunity with over 2 billion Android users worldwide. So I also really appreciate what you guys have done and what other people in the podcast industry have done, way back when I started listening to podcasts and even before that, but also especially in the last few years, just like really helping improve the quality and the variety of different podcasts out there. So cheers to you guys.
Yeah, and Zach, I'd love to follow up with you on that 2 million number. That's got a lot of people going, wow, wow, wow. So,
yeah, where are all those coming from?
Sounds good.
So,
yeah, I know. Good question. We should probably look at. So glad people are following up.
Yeah. So, anyway, thanks for being on, Rob. I guess we got to let you go. We could keep you on here for 3 hours. We appreciate you coming on, Zach.
That's true.
Yeah, we'll have to
so
do it
much.
again sometime. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Okay. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Yep.
Oh.
All right.
Holy crap.
Well,
Oh,
we're
my.
not done here.
Oh, we are not done. Don't leave.
There we go.
Holy cow. Now, there's some 2 million. Where did that number come from?
I don't know. I'm not sure. That's interesting.
Oh,
Maybe
man.
there are a lot of podcasts that Apple hasn't picked up. Maybe
Well-
there's a lot of podcasts out there that people don't know to submit to Apple. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're going to follow up with that one, folks. We want some clarification. So, man, I'm going to
Well,
have to go.
I
I'm
mean,
going to have to
Todd,
go
I mean,
back. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this segment again.
Well, Todd, I mean, it's an interesting question, though, because, I mean, if you think about content that's published online, on the internet, and the
Yeah.
web, right? Not everything is in an RSS feed, I don't think. I don't know. I would think that it would have to be picked up as RSS feeds, or maybe they're getting duplicates. Maybe this gets back to what we were asking them about earlier, that maybe there are duplicate feeds out there that they're picking up. Of the same shows.
Well, it didn't help that 500,000 of them were by the company we talked about on the last show that were hijacking and mirroring feeds. So that accounted for 500,000, and they're still in the index.
Yeah.
So
that would put the total number at 1 million right there.
right, just that group alone. And if you guys don't know who we're talking about Castbox, who has subsequently made those feeds non-public. But the Google Index beast has not purged those listings yet.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's probably the simplest explanation for what's going on there.
Yeah, and also I think that the he said something really critical here. And boy, wait till Angela listens to this, because there's been a feature I've been wanting for a while. It's all about these hashtags, about these jump to, about being able to put a time hack.
Yep.
And jumping to a specific piece of content. And if Google is going to be supporting the index on that and knowing that that tag is in there, bada bing, bada boom, ladies and gentlemen, that's game changer. Because now,
is it really? Let's really pull it apart. Todd,
if you are writing good show notes and have contextual data to go along with that link, again, it's all about the Google beast, about how it indexes your site. It may not be, you may not get a 23 minutes and 30 seconds show up as a specific search result, but maybe that will help trigger or getting into the search ranking if you have a topic that you've covered audio-wise that is titled and metadated correctly. This is some experiments I'm going to have to run now. Geek News Central is, I get between 20 and 200,000 hits a day from Google search engines, just because there's 15,000 articles on the website.
Well, Todd, that question gets back to a much more complex conversation, because if Google is going to do this, it's kind of a hybrid between chapters and jump links to content inside of content. Well, Google is going to have to apply its Google Juice algorithm and basically this ranking of authority, right? Mm-hmm. You could have 10,000 people talking about Google Podcasts, just to use an example.
Yep.
But which would be the number one result for audio talking about Google Podcasts? It's going to be based on authority, right? It's going to be based on trust. It's going to be based on maybe some algorithm that is linked up with popularity, and what other authority figures are linking to that or using that as a reference. So there's going to have to be some other aspects of this. You can't just have a million links showing up in Google search results talking about audio, talking about Google Podcasts. There has to be some sort of ranking algorithm to properly display that.
Well, I think this is just, it just goes back home to everything I continue to talk about, is that if you are building your brand on your .com, you're not worried about being drugged down by someone else with authority that you may not be related to. Rob, I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a dig, but if you're on I think this was going to play well. I'll just leave it at that. It's going to play well for those that are building authority on their own .com.
Well, no, and I think, that's perfectly fine. I think people, I think we're in this time of a little bit of change, though, Todd. I'm hoping that the web and apps, and we've talked about this on the show, kind of merge together, right? And I know that these big companies, and I didn't really push him on this, but kind of this blending, and that's kind of what they're doing here. If you think about it, Todd, they're blending the web search results in with a somewhat native app, right? And kind of blending those experiences together. And I think that's the trend line that I know Apple's working on, Microsoft's working on this stuff to some degree, and Google, of creating these kind of universal apps that kind of, at some point we may not need to use browsers separate from apps. We may just have one experience on our phone.
Well, that's coming with time, but right now, you think, people look up websites by searching. They don't even put the website URL in. They don't.
Yeah, that's right.
They go in, if they're looking for Blueberry, they put Blueberry podcasting in the search results, because we see millions of results coming back to us that way, instead of just them typing blueberry.com.
Yeah, they'll actually type blueberry.com into Google.
Into Google. Right.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what they think they need to do.
Yeah.
They don't think to always put it in the browser, and that gets back to kind of that blending between those two worlds. Because really, if you're using Google typically on a mobile phone, you're using an app,
right?
So, these worlds are colliding on each other. And I think this app is an example of that, that those worlds are coming together, but we're still bouncing back and forth, right? And that's confusing. And that's what's confusing a lot of people that are trying to use this app, is that this combination between the web and the app can create a confusing perspective in one's mind on how it works.
One thing's for sure. If podcasts haven't, and I'm going to be explicit here, if you haven't woke the hell up and understand that this is big, that you need to start getting on the bandwagon here, you're going to lose out. If you're not paying attention to this, if you're just promoting Apple Podcast in your podcast, which many, they make nary a mention of Android. Actually, go ahead, continue, because that's more listeners for the smart podcasters that are promoting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is the wave of the future, and I thought it was really interesting, his comments about the editorial side too. These guys are known for algorithms, right? Much more so than Apple. I mean, you look at what Apple does with podcasts, right? They have an editorial team. They're featuring podcasts based on community input, what they think is popular, and that's what's really built this. But you look at a company like Google, and they're going to build algorithms. They're going to build ways to use machine learning or machine technology to drive this medium forward. And if you start thinking about it on a global scale, that's really the only way it scales. I mean, Apple doesn't even do hand edited editorial into every country in the world. There's 140 countries that they're in with podcasts right now. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if they had a team that did editorial for every country in the world? They'd have a massive team. So a lot of the other countries around the world currently are not hand edited, like the US, Canada, and I think the UK are the only countries that Apple, and I'm guessing at this point, that have an editorial team.
So Evo said on the newmediashow.com/live chat room, he says, and I'm missing in context a little bit here. He said, but let me read what he says. Could be dupes, could be accidental podcasts where someone drops in a media file and WordPress adds an embed tag, or it could be the difference between Yahoo and Google circa 2000 human submitted versus bot discovery. So he's onto something. It's probably their bot that's discovering all these feeds that have an embed in it. And as soon as it sees an embed, it says, oh, that's a podcast. And it may not even be a podcast. It might be someone linking to some content, but it's going to pick it up regardless. In regards to, and it may not be it may be just some guy that's wrote a blog post, wrote an audio link. But typically though, WordPress doesn't do an actual true embed, but it'd be curious. I'm going to have to look around now, I think.
Yeah, I think, Todd, it's more likely what we're talking about here is duplicate RSS feeds, is what's causing, if that's what he's referring to, is the size of the scale of what he said, 2 million feeds. Mm-hmm. And also, maybe it is possible Google's or Apple's not picking up all of the feeds globally, but Google is. I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I think people get so scope locked on just U.S. listeners.
Yeah.
And I look at my stats, and just because I've been so proactive in promoting Android for so long, my U.S. listener base has slipped. I'm now 70 to 73% U.S. The rest is international, and it's because international is much bigger on Android, and I just naturally I'm getting more foreign listeners on Android. So there's just a huge opportunity here that we can't. And if the Apple Podcast folks will listen, we still love you. And we're thankful for you for your helping us since 2005. Let's not forget that.
It's still the backbone of the industry,
right?
Right there, yeah.
But we are seeing and have seen, Android making significant inroads, and I would predict another year we're going to have for those that are promoting Android in their shows, it'll be a level playing field. You're going to be about 50-50. And, but a lot of shows, again, they don't even think about it. They just automatically, they're so ingrained into talking about iOS and Apple. That's all they talk about. So I think
Todd, it's probably not going to take away from Apple's.
No, these are new
listeners
listeners
and podcasts.
No.
These are people that don't own an Apple device.
Right.
So that's where the growth opportunity is. I mean, It's not like Apple's really under threat. Maybe their share of the market is under threat, but that doesn't mean that their user base is under threat.
And then Rob, even my own tech support team, they have not. Two of them don't have Android devices. So what am I ordering Monday? I'm ordering Android devices for two of my tech support team members so that
they can be knowledgeable about it.
Right? So it's not. We're guilty too. So.
Yeah, and I've got a tablet device here that's running the Google Podcast app, so I can see it too. But I've got an iPhone and a Windows phone, so I've got all the platforms here that I can see stuff. But eventually I'm going to have an Android as my daily driver, I think, as far as a phone. But
Evil's doing a little. He does a smiley on the chat room. But here's another thing that we're going to be facing now. The black hatters or white hatters, whatever you want to call them, the internet entrepreneur types, they're going to see this and they're going to go, we're going to have to watch out now because there's going to be literally thousands of shows created that are purely marketing BS that are trying to game this Google search results to get exposure to some scam selling some, secret formula potion. We're going to see a resurgence of this now. Google's pretty good at eliminating the junk, but sometimes the junk ranks for a little bit before it gets delisted
purged.
or purged. So I think we're going to see a surge of that type of activity going on as well. So, but for those that have true good intentions and have the capability of creating multiple feeds, there is a huge opportunity, huge marketing opportunity here. It's huge.
Todd, I still wonder, and we didn't. I don't know that we went into great detail with this. Is how kind of this Google rank, this Google page rank, the Google Juice concept, how this is going to impact that, and how that's going to impact your listings when a person searches for your show. I mean, you've probably primarily come up with the number one search result going to your website, right?
Yeah.
Does this now replace that?
No. Well, what I'm seeing is the podcast search results are below my normal. It's like third down in the list. But Rob, I've also spent 15 years. I was a blogger before I was a podcaster, so I've spent 15, 16 years driving that traffic to that brand.
Yeah.
So that's I don't think that's going to change, but I think podcasters are going to now realize that content, non-podcast content on their website is going to be as valuable in getting page rank than putting a podcast episode up. Because putting a podcast episode up now is not going to be just enough. If you want the cream to rise to the top, you have to have additional content for Google to chew on, to build rank, to build authority. There's a whole, podcasters have never thought about any of this. Majority have never thought about this.
Well, I don't know, Todd. Do we have an idea that somehow that your web page rank somehow influences your podcast rank?
Absolutely, because it's all about where you fall in the stack. Now, if you're going,
I mean, as far as this new app is what I'm talking about.
Well, it's just okay. So if you're searching for your show and you're not the first search result, you got a problem.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? Are you second? Are you third? Or where you fall out in the? Where does Google find you? Where and if you're not being found in your content segment, see, I can be found across many content segments because I have lots of content. People just don't come to the show for the podcast. They come to the show for my review on or one of our writers' review on a mobile app or a game. And when they get there, boom, on the right-hand column of the website, oh my God, this guy has a podcast. Subscribe, and that's the value here. And yes, finding the Google podcast stuff it's I can go on for hours here on this.
Well, I did get a sense, Todd, when he was talking to us, that they were thinking about making this capability available in other platforms and in other, probably still in Chrome, but I would imagine available in other, iOS and Windows. At some point, he didn't overtly come out and say that, but he kind of implied that, right? That would be something that was coming. So they wanted to be more inclusive. So when you clicked on that specific link that we were referring to, that you can auto-generate for your show, and it actually submits your show to Google as well, that it will pull up your podcast no matter what operating system that you happen to be using, and not just Android. So I was very happy to hear that.
Yeah, someone was doing some tests on the New Media Show. They said, or interesting, maybe go. So they were searching for New Media Show with the Android app, and they found 3. The bot is actually picking up duplicates if they are relevant arguments and none like this. So, I'm going to have to look at. Yeah, so interesting. I'm not fully understanding what he found in the search results. Where he's saying you found 3 different listings for the New Media Show that you could subscribe to. Is that what you're saying?
Well, here I'm
doing
a search right now. I typed in New Media Show, and it didn't come up in the number one search result. The Brian Lehrer Show came up.
Yeah, you may have
number one spot.
Yeah, you may have to search for New Media Audio. So this is where there's trouble. And I realize there's some challenges too if you're doing audio and video. So some of this, it's where we're gonna have to make these dedicated landing pages, because Google's confused. He says it's done a good job, but I still think there's some confusion out there, and I see that when people are running. In our specific case, we do both audio and video on the same blog post. So
and it looks like there is another show out there that's done by the BBC Radio 4 called the New Media Show.
Mm-hmm. So there goes, New Media Show. We were going to have to work on our ranking there, right? So nothing is perfect.
I just did a search in the app for New Media Show podcast. So what if I type in the
New Media Show
and see what that comes up with? Media Show, the New Media Show audio.
Yeah, so that's
okay. That does come up,
because I think the actual show was listed as the New Media Show. I think that's how it's actually listed in our RSS feed.
That's what it shows in the actual listing, is the New Media Show audio in parentheses.
Yeah, so what I'll have to do is I'll change that listing to now remove the, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks, because we should own that, because we own newmediashow.com.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know if you can see it there, but
yeah, it's purely because it's really, again, it goes right back down to, so we are not exempt. We have to do some work ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it does it lists 3 episodes, the last 3 episodes, and then you click to see more.
Right.
And it lists all of the.
But I swore I saw some video. I swore I saw some video results. Why don't you do a search for Geek News Central video and see what you come up with?
Okay.
Or do the New Media Show video and see what it comes up with.
New Media Show video. Okay. We're the second results
See?
on the New Media Show video.
Is it for, see, it does support video. See? See?
No, the search result, if you see it
Oh,
there,
it comes up with the audio.
It's just the audio.
Oh, okay.
So it's not even finding the video.
Okay. So.
And we're not even the number one search result.
That's funny.
So, yeah. So I don't know why the Chad Prather show would come up. That's actually on podcast one.
Who knows?
The number one position for
you
that.
have to go look at his metadata to see what's in there. See, that's what we're all going to start doing. I'll go and look at that guy's show. I'll look at the metadata and say, well, why is he ranking for? Because there's something in his metadata that says New Media Show. Guarantee it. Yeah.
So it's a podcast one program,
right?
And it's probably in his metadata, probably. Let's see, but I'm not seeing it. I just went to it and I'm not seeing any mention of.
So what happens when you post in the earlier they were just coming up with examples. Those weren't actual search results. When it was talking about New Media Show being found 3 different times. What happens then when you post an audio file to Twitter? I don't think Twitter has any RSS backend, so hopefully our stuff won't show up as a podcast on Twitter.
Okay, so when I do a search for the New Media Show, it comes up with the Brian Lehrer Show.
Yeah, what's up with that? Who knows? It's crazy.
So if you add audio, then it shows up.
Then it shows up.
They're being very, very literal with the search terms.
Yep.
Is what they are, and they haven't turned on the machine learning yet.
and I found that with Geek News Central too. Same thing. I found the same exact technicality because I show audio and video, so I'm just going to have to go in and clean those up and see how Google treats it. So
yeah, and I don't even see any link to the show anywhere in here, and then at the very bottom of the page, it actually shows search the web. So you have a way to
switch to search the web.
Search the web right at the bottom down there. You can see right here. And so if you click on that, it actually will bring up a Google search result.
So here's what I think is going to happen, Rob, is you're going to see a rush of podcasters going out and buying Android tablets.
Yeah.
So, best place to go, folks, is Amazon. You can use matter of fact, in the show notes, we should put up an Amazon promotional link so that we can earn some money from it.
So the search results that come up with the New Media Show in Google actually ranks
number 1, right?
The New Media Show in the number 1 position.
Yeah.
With the links to the episodes, and then down below it actually links to the video in the number 2 position in Apple. Right.
So when you do a regular Google search result, we come up number 1. That's the main thing. At least we'll be found there first.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what's showing up in the Google Podcast app versus what's showing up in the Google search results.
So 2 different results. Isn't that interesting? The Google search results were number 1, but we're not number 1 in the Google Podcast app. I'm more worried about them finding us in the Google search engine, but we still need to fix the Google app.
Yeah. I mean, it's still okay because most people are going to search in the Google area first.
Right.
But then once they start using the app, then that's where we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the third result here is the New Media Show in Spreaker.
Oh yeah. Is it actually okay, Rob? So does it show it as a podcast?
It looks like it's linking to the
syndicated listing.
No, the Spreaker app. So it's listing a link a internal link into the Spreaker app.
Oh, funny.
To the New Media Show.
Well, we don't care how they get it, as long as they get it. That's the beauty, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting how it's deep linking in search results into other apps, other Android apps,
right,
as well. So that's interesting.
It'll be interesting also to watch how the search results are impacted by directories like Blueberry or even you guys, and see if, where that comes. We're not, we're being very cautious because we understand that, having, just like Castbox, there's no way I want my stuff to, you know what I'm following me here. We're.
Yeah.
I'm like,
these aren't RSS feeds. They're actually linking to instances of the show in other listening apps. So maybe that's the direction that they're going, because the second result that's coming up here in Android, in Google, is a link to the video podcast in Apple Podcasts.
Yeah,
it's actually the second result.
So I think this is all we're all gonna now take a closer look and make some tweaks, and then people like Daniel and Dave are all going to write lengthy articles on things you need to do, to get your stuff squared away. And I'll leave that to those guys to, do this deep dive and give us some best recommendations on what they find. We're going to look internally, obviously, and I know you guys are too, to see what happens here. But yeah, I'm going to be curious to see. I'm going to have to go look at. See, you used to be able, you can tell a page rank. I don't think you can find your actual page rank anymore.
Yeah, those days are gone.
Gone, yeah, because at one time
they didn't want. I don't think they want people to see that anymore.
Yeah, so I varied between a 7 and an 8 in page rank, which was really, really high. And if you were like 4 or 3, you were kind of screwed. You're like on page 2. So I'm going to have to go and look for some content and do some comparisons to see how shows are listed, if they are being impacted based upon where their show resides. Maybe not, but it is a curious experiment to do some testing on.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've done a little bit of that, and we've seen kind of what they've got some work to do to bring the search results and the app search results in more of alignment, right?
Yeah.
Is what I'm seeing. So it's a work in progress, and I am on the Google Podcasts app page in Google Play right now. It's I have it up in front of me, and what it's showing is a ranking based on reviews of a 3.4 out of 5 stars. So far and away, most people selected a 5-star for it. They've had about 6,700 kind of ranking posts in here. So it's probably a fairly good representative sample of where that app is and people's perceptions. I would think Google would want that number up over 4, I would think. So it's just a matter of making some more improvements, I would say, and they'll probably get there.
Yeah. Well, man, this is cool stuff. I'm trying to think. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to our own episode again, because I was watching a chat room and everything else that was going on there, along with what he was saying.
Well, I think this is the first podcast that I think a representative of Google podcast has been on.
Well,
talking about this product, right?
This one should do some numbers then. If you're not subscribed, subscribe now.
Search in Google, right?
Yeah, just go to newmediashow.com. Subscribe. We want you either way. Because every week we're here, at least when we're both at home, we're every week here going through and digging deep on all this stuff. And you can get a PhD in podcasting just by listening to this show. If you go back and listen to 211 episodes, you can build and run your own podcasting company and empire.
Yeah, and we didn't do any pre-planning or prep on this conversation.
No prep
either. This was all, pull up the microphone and like we met him at Starbucks or something.
Yeah, I did have 2 questions from Dave Jackson, and I got those in for Dave. So anyway, that was the prep I did.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we could have talked a lot more to the guy, but it sounds like he's going to be talking more at Podcast Movement. So that's good.
That'll be a session that will. I pity anyone that is married up against them. Hey, Dan, I know you were watching earlier. Just give him a keynote.
Give him a keynote.
When there's no other sessions going on, because whoever's paired up with Google on that day, those sessions are going to be like crickets.
Yeah, because I think you said that his talk was on the 24th, and I think that's the same day as our State of Podcasting panel. So I was going to ask him. So what time is that panel?
He said it hasn't been decided yet. I don't think he's been shoot. It sounded like they don't have an actual time, but
I would imagine Dan's got that booked already.
Yeah, put them in a keynote spot. If there's a possibility, and that way there's no competition.
Yeah, exactly. Put it in the morning on one of the days, right?
Yeah, actually, put it. Yeah. So, or Dan could really make it and hold it all the way to the end, make sure people don't leave. Of course, that may not be a good strategy either.
Well, we can probably invite Dan, see if he maybe can join us next week.
Yeah, I agree.
Be great.
Yeah, hopefully he'll have an hour to spend with us to talk about what's forthcoming. And I heard big numbers, big numbers for this show. I've heard they well exceeded last year's numbers by a significant amount. That was the rumor, and Dan hasn't told me directly, but I heard through third party big numbers.
Yeah, he told me that they've like a month or so ago, or a couple months ago, they actually exceeded their total attendance from last year's event.
Yeah, I had heard
bookings.
I heard the number was over 2,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 2,300. Now, I don't know if that's true, but if there's if the number's 2,300, holy crap.
So Todd, what sessions are you doing? I mean, you're doing the State of Podcasting session with me. That's going to be a filled out panel. So there's going to be you, me, Rob, Carrie Hoffman from PRX, Tom Webster.
Yep.
Are going to be in that session, and Hernan from Wondery is also going to be in that one.
I don't even know what day my other session is. I haven't looked, but I'm basically doing part 2 to the session I did last year. If you attended, okay. It's basically social media strategies for your podcast, and then we're going to go pretty deep. And it's just stuff that I've used over the years and tactics that I've used to build the show. I think there's 7 or 8 topic items that we're going to go into. So I'm going to do partial. There's obviously going to be some new people, so we'll do partial rehash, then deep dive into that content. So there's just no way I could spend 3 hours on it. But I think you get 45 minutes, so I'm going to be talking very, very fast.
On the group call that I had this past week for the State of Podcasting panel coming up, the hot topic on that one was IAB certification claims. People were, that's a pretty hot topic. That's going to be a big, I think, a hot topic on the State of Podcasting panel about, certification, all that stuff around metrics and counting podcasts, and how some platforms out there are making the version 2.0 of the IAB standards an option. So we're going to talk about that stuff.
Well, I don't know if I'll be allowed to talk about it, but our audit should be done. Our IAB audit should be done by Podcast Movement, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it won't be done. It's in progress right now. So. Okay.
Yeah. That's something I need to get going on too.
Yeah, it's a deep dive into your shorts. They bring an independent audit team in, and they rip everything open, and they look question. So we've been in a, back and forth, lots of emails, back and forth, questions, answers, and they're still trying to figure out their process a little bit too. But it's a good to have a nice third-party independent look at your data, and to be able to get verification that you're doing it right, or if you're not, you have to make changes. So far, no changes, but
So after that's been completed and you've been certified, what does that look like from a public perspective? I mean, is there going to be like a certification logo or bug or something?
I'm hoping the IAB hasn't been completely clear on what we get, but we will be, I guess, for a better word, if we do get the quote unquote, there's three things we're being looked at upon, and I don't think the third thing anyone can do now, and I don't want to get into the technical details of it just because it's not possible, but because
it's not ready for
it's
that.
not ready. No, and no one's going to be ready for the third tier. So there's 2 tiers of data that we're getting certified on, and then if we pass both of those certifications, I guess we'll be IAB certified. I caution to use that word because I don't know if that's what they're actually going to call it. I'm assuming they are, but again, we'll know when it's all over. But how that plays out, and how they actually, do I get a certificate? Do I get a logo? Do I get a bug? Do I just get bragging rights? I don't know.
I mean, what's your perspective? I mean, how far down the rabbit hole is the V2 specs on really being a comprehensive certification?
If you do the basics of V2, it's enough. We go deeper.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, because of fraud, and specifically in the fraud prevention part. So it's probably enough. You had 36 companies that had to agree to a spec.
Yeah, of course there's going to be holes, right?
Right. And you
not everybody's going to agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In principle, the made points are if we can just get everybody on this 24-hour window and follow all the rules or all the guidelines, we'll be much better off as a podcasting space. But anyone that's outside the 24-hour measurement window, their stats are not right.
And if some platforms are making that a content provider choice,
well, then they better be disclosing that to their media buyers, and the media buyers should be accounting for that accordingly.
Yeah, and that's going to be a hot topic on the panel, is how that's going to be handled. I mean, once that gets out, right, that these platforms are doing that. And it does raise questions with credibility with the advertisers, doesn't it?
Well, okay. I'm not going to be one to name names, I don't think. Is someone?
Yeah, I'm not going to name names either, but yeah. But it's happening.
Well, anyway, that's be a topic discussion for we could probably spend 2 hours on Rob, we only have 45 minutes. We're supposed to talk about the state of podcasting, not the state of podcast statistics.
No, that's right. There's definitely a bunch of other stuff. I think that the panel is probably not going to want to spend a lot of time on that, because that's going to be a contentious topic. But it'll just be something that is in addition to a lot of other really important topics that we want to talk about during that session.
Right. And Rick, yes, I'm glad you don't run a platform. Too much work. You have no idea, my friend. You have no idea. Yeah. We're going to have some announcements for Podcast Movement too, where we got some products ready to roll. And I may have something to show, a mock-up of something that we're doing that Daniel Lewis will do triple backflips on. So
triple backflip.
Well, I'm serious. It's really cool. It's something that we created or came up with. So Daniel, you'll have to come talk to us and get if I don't have a mock-up, I'll tell you the concept, and you're still going to do backflips.
So speaking of that, Todd, is there any other questions that we got from the was it Facebook group or whatever that group was that we want to talk about on the show?
Let me go back and look at all the stuff. because they were in 3 different areas. And if you want to repost a question we haven't answered, please do in the chat room. Okay, right.
And it's probably about time to get Rob Walsh back on the show too. So
yeah,
it'd be good to have him, but probably not before Podcast Movement though.
yeah. All right, I'm looking through the. Yeah, I don't see anything in that chat, and I can't go too far back in Facebook chat.
Oh,
just
okay.
because it doesn't let me scroll.
Oh, great.
Oh yeah. Let me look at the IT because I got 3 chat rooms running here, and let me look at anybody in YouTube live window. I'm looking at your guys' stuff. Okay, so Ava said, I may not have caught it, but did we get conversion that plays in Google Podcasts are reporting back to the media host? Yes, they are not caching media. They are using the direct links. So any download or stream is definitely being reported, Evo. So that is making it back. What happened to old Google? I got a bunch of spam in the live chat window. Let's see here. Beauty Bubble says, isn't the question what makes a podcast a podcast? Yeah, an RSS feed with an enclosure. And probably the bot is not smart enough to know otherwise. Will Google be using this to deliver ads? I think right now, no.
No, I don't believe so.
But Jonathan,
they're trying to build audiences. What their first goal is here.
Well, I hate Rob. You said something there. First goal. I know you're under NDA, so I don't want to read too much into that. But let's hope that's not second goal is ads. But
I don't know if it's the second goal
or
not. But I mean, if you think about it, Google is an advertising company. So I mean, at some point, maybe there will be something that happens on that side. But certainly, what they're worried about is trying to capture their market share. Right?
Yeah. So Jonathan,
if you think about it,
I would tweet Zack at ZackRW is his Twitter address. You can tweet him and ask that question.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and when you find out that answer, please respond back to us here at the New Media Show.
You probably won't.
Yeah. Oh, he probably won't respond to that question, right?
Well, or yeah, maybe he doesn't even have an answer for it yet. That's the other thing too. So
Todd and Rob, do Blueberry and Spreaker report properly so people using your platform can see them? I'm going to have to ask Angelo if we've updated the user agents. I'm off the top of my head. I'm going to say yes. Mike, are you in the chat room? Can you respond to that? Do you know if the user agents have been updated for Google Podcast? Tells you how often I look at stats, Evo. I don't. They used to live in them. I only go there when I need to now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have the user agent plugged into our stat system yet. I know it's a project that we're actively working on right now. So if it's not, it will be very soon.
Daniel says, yes, I see Google search app in my Blueberry stats.
Okay. Angelo, yay.
Yeah. So that's one thing I didn't have to. Hey, did you get this done?
Yeah, right.
Because I'm always asked for 25 different things a day.
Yeah.
Where them equals access to media files via Google. Okay, what am I? I'm trying to read Evo's question. Where them equals access to media files via Google. Okay, I guess I'm not following your logic there, Evo. I need a cup of coffee. I think that the in the end here, though, this is just, we should be watching those numbers too on stats. This is something we should, as a community, within our independent stats systems. I'll pull a report here before I go to Podcast Movement and see what kind of traffic, and then we'll know when they bust into the percentage. That'll be real key, is because we're tracking 150 different devices and apps, and it'll be interesting to see when they break above 1% or 2% or 3% in global market share. They can start climbing that pillar, we'll know that they're making inroads. I have no idea where they're at in global market share right now.
And I think they're just getting off the ground.
Yeah, and podcasters, again, have to promote it,
Yeah.
And they have to link to it on their website,
Yeah.
And the update to PowerPress is coming, and it has this link that he was talking about built in. So I think it's built in, or at least give them the tool to look it up. So we'll have that as a destination in the sidebar, subscribe sidebar.
Yeah, and there is that tool, like you mentioned, where you can type in, you can cut and paste in your RSS feed, and it will generate a direct link into the app.
Yeah. Can someone send me that? I've got that link buried. Can someone email that to me, that link? Do you have that, Rob, that data?
Yeah.
I've got it somewhere.
I don't have it right in front of me. But
I can probably Google it and find it.
Well, it's in my Twitter wall, or my Twitter stream.
Yeah.
So you can get it there if you scroll back, like say a week or so. You can get it in there. Trying to think here.
But here's the thing that Jonathan says. I like what James Cridlin said. The ones that clicking subscribe links probably are the ones not using dedicated apps, but not necessarily true. If you're being found in search results, here's the key. It's not when this is where people miss the point. It's not when they're searching for a show, they're going to find your show. It's when they're searching for a topic and find your show is where the opportunity is.
Mm-hmm.
When they're not looking for a podcast and you show up in the Google search results as a podcast related to that topic, this is where the true opportunity is.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's on an Android device, I want to listen to a new media show, they're going to load their favorite app and they're going to go to a new media show. They're going to find it and subscribe to it.
But they have to already know that show exists, right?
Right.
And what you're talking about is more of a serendipity of experience around discovery, right?
And this is how
it's more context.
And this is where the golden goose lays the egg every day with Google, by traffic that is searching for I can't speak English, a non-related topic and find or a related topic to your show and find your show because of Google search results. And now they see in this Google in there on their Android phone only, they see, oh, wow, there's a podcast about basket weaving. Let me check that out. So,
but Todd, it's not always that simple either, because I mean, some shows lend themselves towards keyword searches more so than others, depending on what the keywords are, right?
Bada bing, bada boom.
I mean, if you look at a ranked chart of how many people search for certain keyword phrases, it's very revealing. I mean, it's something that I think everyone that's trying to market on the internet or on the web needs to do. They need to go in and get access to some of these rankings.
Just remember now,
on keyword phrases.
And Google obscures keyword rankings now. You can't see what keywords are. You can guess by the pages they're landing. If you look at your referral data, they don't show you which keyword has been used to find your page on your website.
But Todd, I thought that you could do that if you go into the Google AdWords.
If you're going to Google AdWords, that kind of stuff. But if you're looking at
look it up.
If you're looking at your Google Analytics, though, your regular Google Analytics, they will not show you anymore the referral data. They cut that out a couple of years ago. The referral keyword. If you're going in and buying or looking to buy keywords to run sponsored link ads, they will show you a ranked list of
how many people are searching for a particular keyword phrase.
Because you're going to spend money on that. But,
that's right.
But if you have a diversity of content, you're going to be found across a diversity of keywords and search results. Yeah.
So I guess it gets back to, certain podcasts are going to be able to be ranked better or worse depending on their topics, right? I've always thought that certain show topics would actually do better in Google than others, right? Depending on the interest level that people have for those topics and whether or not they're searching. I mean, if you think about how YouTube works, and I think it's an interesting analogy here, is people have used YouTube as a how-to platform, right?
Right.
people want to fix their sprinkler system. You go and you type in how to fix a sprinkler system, right? That's a keyword phrase. It brings up search results that will show you, how to fix something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same analogy can apply to podcasting too.
Yep.
Certain keyword phrases are going to bring up certain shows, but it needs to be something that people are looking for, right? Also, it's not going to generate much results.
So, as an example, I did an episode on Geek News Central. I just opened an incognito window, so I was not logged in and not having my own account influence my search results. And I put in Tesla builds cars and tents. I'm the number one ranking article on that, and it's a podcast. So there was a big news about Tesla reaching 5,000 cars being made a week,
per week, yeah.
Made per week, and it was because they had opted to go and build some of the cars in tents. And I thought, well, there's a good headline. And I talked about 30 different things in my show, but I thought, what's going to trend the best? What is relevant right now, and what may drive traffic later? So I'm very, very picky in the title of my episode, so that again, someone's just searching for, I heard about they're building cars and tents. Ba-boom, I'm number one in the results. So, and there's 20 on this first page. There's 10 different companies. I beat Wired. I beat Mother Jones. I beat Verge. I beat Chicago Tribune. I'm number one in that result. So, what value is that on that specific term? Maybe that's going to drive 10 people to my website, but maybe one subscribes.
Mm-hmm.
Going back again and again here, trying to hammer this home on how important this is.
Yeah. And with what Google is doing now, it's only going to make it more important.
Right.
And I think that's the big takeaway here, is that what Google is trying to do here, and what we've kind of discovered just by some basic searching here, is that Google is still a little bit off the mark when it comes to internal app searching compared to Google's search results, which seem to be spot on.
Yeah.
Right.
And Rick, to answer your question, I'm at 1296. And this show is episode 212. So, well, anyway, Rob, we're long. Wow, exciting show.
Yeah,
this is one for the record books. If this one doesn't drive some listens, nothing will.
Well, there is another big player that's coming that maybe we can get on board. Actually, I would love to get Spotify in here at some point, so I can try that at some point.
All right, their team is in Europe. I mean, in the UK, so
yeah, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess it would be the afternoon for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, I'd love to have them on. I'm a little tired of being Spotify tech support, though.
Yeah. Hey, you and I both. But next week for us anyway, things are going to be opening up. We're going to be submitting via the APIs. So
yeah, I actually was like, that was a dev support. We have a Slack channel. I'm like, where are we at on this?
Yeah, exactly.
Where is this? When's this delivering? Get this out of my hair, please.
Yeah. It's been a long road.
Oh God.
Yeah. A lot of pain and suffering.
You don't want to ask my support guys about Spotify.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, we got the same thing going on. Everybody's like, please get that 5,000 shows over there right now. Yeah,
we're not back. I think we're backlogged. Well, we're not backlogged. They have 2,500. I think we're waiting on.
Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, right.
It's not.
No, Todd, it is your fault.
Don't shoot me.
You didn't push Spotify hard enough to get this done, Todd.
Don't shoot me. And just for the record, if you have a PowerPress, if you're using PowerPress for your podcast and you're hosted on Blueberry, yes, you can be part of Spotify. If you're using PowerPress and you're not hosting it at Blueberry, I can't help you. It's not my fault.
Yeah, right. Well, we all have specific deals with Spotify to submit. primarily the only way they're getting content into their platform.
Right.
So
I tried.
yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News is where I'm at on Twitter. We love your comments, so be free to email Rob and I. Rob, how can they reach you?
Well, on Twitter at Rob Greenlee, that's with 2 E's, and then email's really a great way to reach out to me too. And it's a little old school, right? Rob at voxnest.com or Rob at Spreaker.com. You can use either one to reach me. I still work for Spreaker. I'm not, I sometimes get asked, Todd, so you're not working for Spreaker anymore. You're working for VoxNest. Why don't you tell me about that? Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you have the branding issue. We worked through our branding issues 6-7 years ago. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Well, you've got lots of brands too. In some ways, you've got some, multiple things that you're doing too.
Yeah, but the center of the universe is still at blueberry.com, and
it is. Yeah. You've done a good job of kind of focusing that down, and that's kind of what you're going to see at Podcast Movement for us too. I've been working really closely with the team to get our branding thing under control. So
and we do. It doesn't help when we have a bunch of little side projects, but their projects are fun.
yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. You've heard us ramble here at the end. So when you email us both, we'll actually usually respond to both. I think you and I responded to an email. Both of us responded to an email earlier in the week.
Yeah.
So
well, a couple of them actually.
Yeah,
we've gotten in a few. Yeah.
So you're all becoming more engaged with us, and if you up the engagement, we'll give you one email, but not until you up the engagement. So
that's right. We'll engage with you if you engage with us.
Yeah,
so
that's a fact.
It's a synergistic relationship.
And I appreciate we had a huge audience today on live. Thank you so much. And if you're catching this later or have caught it later, we appreciate you as well. Subscribe to the show. Don't miss a single episode. We're always talking about something juicy. And if you've got insider information, you got dirt. We love dirt. So send that over too.
It doesn't have to be dirt, Todd.
Rumors.
There you go. Or things that you think are being done that are questionable.
Yeah. Right? We love to talk about that kind of stuff. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time or next week on the New Media Show. Everyone take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.